Spider-Man is one of the most well-known fictional characters in existence. Maybe you first saw him through a movie, a show, or maybe even a video game. That's right, when you have one of the most popular characters ever made, you're probably going to try and make a few bucks off of some video games. With Spider-Man 2 just being released, I realized that with how many Spider-Man games are in existence, there's probably a lot of Spider-Man 2s. So to commemorate the new release, like a month after it was still relevant, we're going to take a look at every version of Spider-Man 2. Now, to be clear, the games that count in this video are the ones that have Spider-Man and 2 right next to each other in the title. It doesn't matter if there are any extra words mixed in there. So with that being said, the first game we have is The Amazing Spider-Man 2 for the Game Boy. Now, we're not talking like Andrew Garfield Amazing Spider-Man 2, we're talking whoever this guy is Amazing Spider-Man 2. So the premise of this game is that Spider-Man is being framed. For what? Turning bad, apparently. Hobgoblin. Yeah, I don't know what that is, but I'm pretty sure it's not a hobgoblin. So the game then thrusts you right into it, and while trying to learn the game's controls, I apparently used all of my web fluid, and now I have no idea how to get it back. No big deal, Spider-Man doesn't even really use webs that often anyway. So after walking outside of this building, we have Hobgoblin chucking bombs everywhere, guys walking around with flamethrowers, and this guy having a lot of fun with his new gun. Safe to say that this might be a little too much for old Spidey to handle. I mean, New York wasn't that great to begin with. He should just move somewhere more peaceful like Alaska. Oh wait, never mind. So this game is kind of like a beat-em-up, and a bad one too. You just sort of wander back and forth, and I'm sure that there is some sort of goal I'm striving towards, but I have no clue what it is. I even tried attacking Hobgoblin himself to see if that did anything, but you can't even hit him. At one point I fell down this hole which had some resources in it, which was nice, but then I was kind of confused on how to get out and thought that I had just soft-locked the game somehow. But then I learned that you can in fact climb walls in this game. If you are wanting me to tell you how, I can't. I just sort of pressed buttons until it worked, and even then I can't do it very consistently. So I know this may come as a big surprise to you guys, but I'm not a big fan of The Amazing Spider-Man 2 on Game Boy. So to be honest, after the last game, hearing that there was another Spider-Man 2 on the Game Boy Color, my hopes weren't very high. The game is called Spider-Man 2 Sinister 6, and right from the beginning you can tell that at least the game had a little more effort put into it, with it having stuff like a difficulty selection. And then right after that, the game actually has a decent opening cutscene that explains the premise of the game much better than the last one did. So far, the game has some impressive parts to it, but the gameplay is where it really counts, so I won't say anything too good until we get there. And upon starting the game, you can immediately tell how much of a difference the Game Boy Color makes. Everything here is much more vibrant and colorful, which is a very welcome change after the last game. Sometimes when you punch an enemy, it does one of those comic book onomatopoeia bubbles, which is a really nice touch. But onto the gameplay itself, it's also surprisingly pretty good. Combat feels pretty simple and easy to understand while also still being fun. Crawling on walls actually has a pretty simple control scheme where you just have to go in the direction you want to without having to learn any weird button combinations. And you can actually web swing in this game. And it's fun too. I don't know what happened during the development of this game, but they actually made a really fun Spider-Man game on Game Boy Color, which is more than I can say I've done. Next up, we have the first Spider-Man 2 game in 3D, Spider-Man 2 Enter Electro. This game is a sequel to the first 3D Spider-Man game, which is pretty well regarded from what I can tell. This game, however, is one you don't really hear about all that often, which is a little strange, especially when it's the sequel to a game that is pretty well known. To start, I think a lot of things in this game have aged surprisingly well, and a lot of other stuff hasn't. The movement, even though being a little jank, is in my opinion completely acceptable for a Spider-Man game on the PS1. The combat is very simple, but that's also why it works. The game doesn't require you to do anything crazy, you just punch and web up the bad guys. The game also looks pretty decent, with stuff like Spider-Man's suit having a lot more detail on it than in the first game, but in my opinion where the game fails is when it asks you to do some annoying or frustrating task. I didn't play very far into the game, but one of the first annoyances I ran into was the Shocker boss fight, which can be very annoying with Shocker constantly hitting you over and over again, while you're expected to throw objects at him that he can also break with his attacks. Then immediately after this, you have a bomb mission where you have to find keys to deactivate the bomb. You get the keys by defeating enemies, but you are given no hints as to where these enemies are, and you are also under a pretty strict time limit. I think this game falls apart when it wants you to do something more precise or quickly, because the game just doesn't control well enough for me to do that kind of stuff and have fun with it. During normal missions where you are just swinging from rooftop to rooftop beating up bad guys, the game can be pretty fun. From what I've heard and seen, the original game is probably better than this one, so I definitely want to give it a try. Not in this video though, because we got more Spider-Man 2s to talk about. Next up, we have one of the most well-known Spider-Man games ever made. Spider-Man 2 for the GameCube, or PS2, or Xbox, or Game Boy Advance, or DS, or N-Gage. Yeah, so this game has a lot of versions out there. The GameCube, PS2, and Xbox versions all look pretty much the same, so I'll be using the GameCube version for this video. The main thing this game is remembered for is the swinging. This was the first Spider-Man game to actually have the swinging feel like swinging, as well as some other details like the webs actually sticking to the buildings instead of just attaching to the heavens. Now, if you're like me and mostly have experience with newer Spider-Man games, then it may be a little hard to get your bearings at first, but once you get into it, it's pretty fun. One of my favorite parts about old movie tie-in games like this is that they would just make up stuff to make the game longer. Like, there's a whole Mysterio subplot early in the game, which is awesome because that's one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. Now, don't misinterpret what I'm about to say. I do like this game, but time has not treated it well. While this game can be incredibly fun at times, it can also be incredibly jank at times. The game can be pretty frustrating to control, especially the combat. Once you defeat an enemy, they just sort of ragdoll on the floor, but sometimes Spider-Man just continues to target them anyway, which can make combat encounters with a lot of enemies pretty frustrating. This game also gives you a lot of control over the swinging and doesn't really help you out at all like some of the newer games do, so you will be hitting plenty of walls during your playthrough of this game. There is an easier option for swinging, but it also locks you out of some of the moves you can pull off, so that isn't really a good option either. But if you can get past some of the junk, it's still pretty fun. A lot of the tasks you do in the open world can be pretty repetitive, which would be fine except for the fact that they are mandatory to continue on in the game. The game is divided into chapters, and every chapter you are required to get a certain amount of hero points, which requires you to do all the side stuff. There is just like a pool of side missions the game can choose from, and you are constantly getting objectives that are super similar to what you just did. To be fair though, this was a movie tie-in game made in 2004, so the fact that this is fun at all is pretty amazing. They even got some of the movie cast as voice actors in this game. I don't think our old pal Toby really wants to be here though. He sounds like some of my old YouTube videos where I was too scared to talk loud into the mic. But like I said earlier, this wasn't the only version of this game that was released. There are the versions of this game on PC and PSP, which I haven't gotten around to playing, and from what I've seen, I don't think I want to get around to those. So that leaves us with the Game Boy Advance and DS versions of the game. The Game Boy Advance version of the game is something, alright. Starting off, we have one of the crustiest cutscenes you ever saw, and man is it beautiful. Most of the main cutscenes for the game are also just screenshots of the already not great character models from the GameCube versions that are then made extremely low res so they can fit on the GBA. It's truly just a beautiful sight. But the actual game itself has a pretty nice look to it. This game genuinely looks like a sequel to the other Spider-Man 2 on the Game Boy Color, which is great because I really like that game. Just like in that game, the visuals here are nice and colorful and everything's made to look like a comic book. Now, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for a game based on the Spider-Man 2 movie, but I don't care. I like it. The gameplay is also, for the most part, pretty similar except for one small detail. The web swinging sucks. Yeah, so in Sinister 6, the web swinging wasn't anything revolutionary, but it was still fun and made the game a whole lot more enjoyable. The swinging in this game works fine enough, but just feels so meh compared to the other game. It honestly really sucks because in most other areas, this game is a pretty cool follow-up to Sinister 6. Oh wait, I forgot about the city sections. So to try and make this game a little more similar to the console versions, we have these open 3D sections where you can swing around the city. Can you tell the GBA wasn't meant to do 3D? These sections are rough and do not run well at all. I get what they were going for here, and it is technically impressive, but it's not fun. The actual levels themselves look and feel good to play for the most part, but honestly I didn't find any of them that fun. A lot of them are just go deliver pizzas in the time limit, go explore this really boring prison with a very annoying elevator in the middle to find keys to get out. I really liked a lot of things about this game, like the style, but it just kind of fell flat for me in a lot of other areas. So the final version of this game was on the DS, and this one I'm a little mixed on. Basically, all of the movement in this game feels pretty good, and I had fun just swinging through the levels and beating up criminals. The web swinging also feels pretty fast in this game, which I really like. The movement is definitely the best part of this game, but could really use some better level design. Well, I haven't played through much of the game at all because I don't want to drive myself insane playing all these Spider-Man games. The first level starts out fine, but then quickly becomes this really annoying and confusing section where you're just wandering around this burning building looking for civilians to save. It just wasn't a whole lot of fun, and I just sort of felt like I was wandering around in circles for a while. This game is very much just a wander around the level, searching for the objective kind of game, and those are just almost never that fun. I think if the game went for a more traditional start-to-goal levels, it could be pretty fun, especially since the movement feels as good as it does, but once again, this is just another mediocre game that had a little bit of potential. I'm going to be honest with you guys here. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 game has been the bane of my existence for like a week. Not because I have been playing it and really hating it, which from the looks of it I think I would, but because someone is trying to keep this game from me. The game has been wiped from every digital storefront known to man, but that was okay. I could still get a physical copy, so I ordered a physical copy from eBay. The box was in the worst shape I have ever seen a Wii U box in, and then upon putting the game into my Wii U, it did not work. I thought about trying a little harder to find another copy or for a better way to play this game, but then I watched some gameplay, and I don't think I'm missing out on much. This game looks like some of the most bland and crappy open world schlop I have ever seen. Honestly kind of fitting based on the movie it was about, so I realized that spending any more of my time or money on a game that would ultimately take up like 2 minutes of a video might not be worth it. And to the guy who sold me this piece of junk, you don't accept returns, so yeah, there's not much I can do here. It's fine, I needed a new drink coaster anyway. But a version of this game I was able to play was the version available on 3DS. This game is bad. Yeah, so not very surprisingly, the 3DS version of a game that wasn't very good also wasn't very good. This game is a 2D side-scroller, and man, this game just looks so bland. Everything is just so gray, and I can barely ever tell where in the world I'm supposed to be. And then the game has these swinging sections where the frame rate drops to like 2. Yeah, I don't really want to talk about this game anymore. There's just nothing to say. Let's just move on to the good game. So here we are. The final Spider-Man 2, and what a game to go out on. This was one of my most anticipated games of this year, and I can definitely say it did not disappoint. Much like the games that came before this one, I often find myself booting up the game just to swing around and not really do anything. Everything in this game, from the swinging to the combat, just feels so good. I have 100%ed this game twice, and it's only like a month or two old. Now don't get me wrong, the game definitely has some issues. While some side quests are absolutely amazing and on par with some of the main campaign missions, others feel like complete filler, like a lot of Miles Vision's Academy missions. MJ missions also return in this game, even though literally everyone unanimously agreed that the games would be better without them. But other than some of those small issues, I really enjoyed my time with this game. You can tell a lot of care went into making this game what is basically the video game equivalent of a blockbuster movie. I don't want to get into any heavy spoilers or anything, but trust me when I say that this game has some really cool and really fun moments. While I wouldn't say that the story is better than the first game, it's also pretty clear that they were going for a story that's more of a spectacle than the last one, which I am personally fine with. Gameplay-wise though, this game feels like the ultimate culmination of every Spider-Man game that came before it. The web swinging feels amazing, and with the new option to adjust swing assistance, more people can customize the web swinging to make it feel how they want it to. The combat also feels pretty good, with Miles being pretty similar to how he was in his game that I covered a little while back. Peter has gotten way more changes though, with his combat being not nearly as focused on gadgets as it was in his game. This game really only has 4 gadgets you can use between both characters, which is kind of a letdown in my opinion. Lots of my favorite gadgets from the first game, like the impact web or the web bomb, are just not present in this game, which was kind of disappointing to me. But clearly the main reason they did this was because Peter has his new symbiote powers that he can use. He also has these mechanical spider arms as well, but let's be honest, the symbiote is way cooler. Every single symbiote attack just feels so amazing to use, which pretty much makes up for the missing gadgets in my opinion. While Miles is still very fun to play as, I mean, come on, it's just cooler being Black Suit Spider-Man. Why do you think there are so many video games that let you do that? Like I said earlier, this game has quite a few issues, but ultimately the core gameplay is just so fun that I don't really care about some of those problems. This game is probably my personal favorite game of the year, which is saying a lot because my game of the year is basically always some Nintendo game, and there were a lot of good Nintendo games this year. So to my knowledge, that was every video game I could find with the word Spider-Man and 2 in the title. The real question is, did I have any fun making this video? Sometimes. Mostly no. That's kind of how it usually goes with licensed games. Most of them are just meh and are meant to use well-known characters to market to children or losers. But occasionally in the giant rubble pile of garbage, you can find some really good stuff. I think the games I showed you in this video are a perfect example of that. Some of these games were clearly made to just be cash grabs, and some had some real passion put into them. I think the character of Spider-Man is just one that works really well in the video game format, so looking through some of these games and seeing which games worked and which didn't was really interesting to me. And I got a new doormat.